Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Founders Chair podcast. Andy Goldberg here. And I'm extremely excited to have on the show today Nick Pantelli from the company Attollo. Nick, welcome to the Founders Chair.
Thank you very much for the invitation, Andrew. Pleasure to speak with you.
Really excited to hear your story, Nick. Can we start with your personal story? Where you're from, where you live, family, hobbies, anything you can tell us just so we get to know you a little bit.
Sure. So I suppose a lot of my personal story is also wrapped up in, the business that I've created, and we can move on to that in a second. But originally, family's from Cyprus. I was born in the UK, though. Grew up just outside of London, and then went up to Scotland to study psychology. Fell in love with the country, decided to stay, and that's kind of where I built my business. With regards to like hobbies, a lot of it is just spending meaningful time with friends and family, creating memories, that sort of thing, going on the occasional adventure, and then just trying to look at ways to build myself as an individual and hopefully contribute some of that back towards other individuals that are also on similar journeys as well.
And tell us your story about how the business came about, Nick, and what first of all, what motivated you to go into business for yourself, and what gave you the confidence that you felt you could run your own business?
Great question. I suppose when I started Attollo, I was relatively young. I was still at university, and so maybe a little bit of naivety. And at that point, I just kind of had the feeling that if I was going to start this thing, everything was going to work out fine. There would be no like downfalls or pitfalls or anything like that. It would all just be a hockey stick upwards. And my lived reality is slightly different from that. What I think really kind of set the impression for me is while studying psychology at university, I was also working in the charity sector. Always wanted to engage in a role where, I felt like I was helping an end community to improve themselves. And the third sector felt, that it had some common values there. So I worked across the UK, different charities, spoke with over 25,000 people door to door and as a street fundraiser. And whilst we always got a good reception and we were able to make, consistent sign-ups, always kind of ran into the same objections, which is, the charity model is completely donor reliant, essentially. It's very top heavy, it lacks transparency. And unfortunately, there are stories of like abuse and corruption that kind of end up tarring the entire industry and losing a sense of confidence between the public and, the third sector organizations. So after hearing this, many, many times, essentially across the UK, I just kind of thought that there must be a better way to, help improve the lives of marginalized communities, but without having to go through the same structural bottlenecks that are currently present in the third sector. And then that thought just kind of started to grow in my mind. And it just got to a point where it just became a problem that I had to solve. So I just kind of spent every working day, every working minute on trying to refine an idea kind of where we are with Attollo. So I hope that answers your question for you.
Does indeed. Yeah, thanks. Tell us a little bit about Attollo. What do you actually do, and how do you do it?
Sure. So our vision is to eliminate poverty, and our model allows for above market returns. So we're a paradigm shift from the typical charity model. Typically, the way that I would look to explain it is that we're building a social networking platform based on blockchain infrastructure that allows people in deprived communities to solve the problems that they face on a daily basis, funded through sustainable revenue streams instead of donations, whilst also being able to monetize their own social data. So, to in maybe in a more accessible way, the way that I would explain this is that we believe that people in deprived communities or any communities are inherently aware of the problems that their community faces. Typically, the issue that they have is a lack of network, lack of resources and funds, and then lack of maybe the skills to solve the problems themselves. But they have the idea. So they would come to Attollo, a free platform, and they would post their solutions to the challenges that they face. The rest of our user base then engage with these ideas through likes, comments, shares, and votes. What we do as an organization is we track that measurement, that social engagement, as a measure of demand, and that generates sustainable revenue streams on our platform. We would then take a percentage of those revenue streams and we would use that to cover the startup costs, if you like, of the projects that generate the most demand. which takes the full financial burden off of the average individual. It removes the need for a donation model, and it separates us from the typical charity model. We then look to set these projects up as businesses or cooperatives or free for use, and they can sell a good or service back to our user base through an in-house e-commerce system, which allows them to grow sustainably over time. Now, as they grow, they can hire people local to the area, and it's through that sustainable job creation model that we believe that we can eliminate poverty in the areas in which we work. So simply just by sitting on our phones scrolling like we're all guilty of doing, you would do that on Attollo. You generate the revenue that we need by helping local communities solve local issues, and then obviously we would create that impact above market returns to our investors as well. So, a real paradigm shift from the typical trickle down donation model.
Yeah, and I mean, you're clearly very passionate about what you do, and you've created a business that makes a real impact. Like it helps other people, it changes people's lives, and you've created a business out of this.
Thank you. Yeah.
Did you have somebody in your life that's kind of pushed you or inspired you to do this and create this, or is it pretty much of your own? You devise this yourself, or?
A mixture, I would say, at different stages of the company, and from idea to early incorporation and so on. Try to take inspiration from different individuals that I engage with. Sometimes they can just be, random people that you have a conversation with, and sometimes they're a little bit closer to home. Lucky enough to have a good friendship network and family network as well. So, at different stages, they've obviously helped contribute to improving the idea. But ultimately, I think my real inspiration actually just comes from the average individual. Having worked, in several different industries and lots of different jobs, inherently aware of, the issues that people face if you're working minimum wage jobs and the standard of living's getting, more and more expensive. And I think a lot of the inspiration just comes from the average person just going about their day, trying to keep a roof over their head, trying to keep food on the table for their family, keep everybody warm, and move on to the next milestone. So that's really what has kind of helped spur me forward, especially during times where progress has been a little bit further away than what we initially anticipated. But on a more personal note, the person that was really kind of lit the fire for this, if you will, was my gran. So Attollo is kind of in memory of her after her passing, and I think as in order to create something that can hopefully represent her and all of the teachings that she gave me and the rest of our family, I believe that that's what's continued to spur me on from one step to another, really. So
Yeah,
that's
that's
really
lovely. Yeah, it's really nice backstory there.
thank you.
What I'm interested in hearing a little bit about the journey so far as a business owner. What would you say has been your biggest learning as a business owner to date?
Yeah, it's a good one. I would say the biggest learning to date as a business owner would be, especially at the beginning, it really kind of all is on you as the individual to continue to push your business forward. People will help, people will support, and they'll encourage you. But in terms of just like the day-to-day grind, if you continue to show up, hopefully you continue to make that progress. Especially if your business isn't making any revenue at the early stages, the only thing which is going to push that business forward is the tenacity of the individual to
Yeah.
really bring that to life. And that's been hard. Sometimes it causes you to have to make some form of compromise, or you have to choose whether the next milestone, achieving the next milestone for the business, is worth maybe missing a family holiday or birthdays, or certain key personal events. And that's been a recurring theme for myself, is that I found that at every stage of our progress that we've made, it's come at some sort of personal cost on my side, having to miss key things, or turn away from other opportunities that otherwise I would have really liked to partake in. But for me, the business was always something that inherently I knew that I wanted to be able to do, and just kind of have to make those sacrifices as I can, really.
What would you say has been the biggest challenge that you've had to face as a business owner during the years?
So for us, it was always funding because I started the Attollo whilst I was at university. I was a student. I was broke. I had an idea and I had my laptop, and then I had the utilities of the university that I was staying at for like free Wi-Fi that I could use to build the business. But I always knew very early on that the initial investment to get the business up and running and to sustain it in the earliest stages was going to be far outside my own earning capacity. So I looked at it and I figured, what can I control and what am I able to do? And I just kind of progressed down that road really. So by continuing to refine the idea and build the business and network, within the first 2 and a bit years, we were introduced and yeah, we received an invitation to the United Nations in New York, and then to the House of Lords. Our first client was the European Commission. We successfully ran a international conservation project on their behalf as well. But none of that really translated to investment in the early stages. We got to the point where it was looking like we were about to raise our first outside round, about 2.5 mil, building out the paperwork for that. And after like years and years of like really hard work and a lot of sacrifice, a lot of pain, we were very, very close to, getting the capital that we needed. And then COVID hit and pipelines got frozen, investment propositions got withdrawn. And I was just left trying to keep the business, afloat with limited cash myself, and then trying to manage like other relationships outside of the business as well. So that really, really took a toll. And since then, we've just really been trying to rebuild, to be honest with you.
Yeah, so it's that tenacity that you mentioned earlier that comes back into play now, isn't it? Our ability to bounce back from the setbacks, and we don't always get the result that we expected. Um, so what's the next big thing for you in your business, Nick? What do the next 1 to 3 years look like in terms of growth and opportunities and challenges?
Yeah, so we were actually really excited about like the next few years, to be honest with you. Luckily enough, we've been accepted into one of the world's best accelerators, backed by Silicon Valley, which is the Founders Institute. So that gives us access to resources, networks, and then warm introductions to essentially all of the major investment firms in Silicon Valley as well, on top of the network that I've been able to build, etc. Too. So we're currently going through their cohort, which is really exciting. From there, what we're also looking to do is raise the initial capital that we need to build out our tech infrastructure, launch our platform and the early portfolio of projects. As we do that, we'll be able to drive our user growth, which then links to early signs of revenue. And then hopefully it just gets to a point where, we can help disenfranchised communities or marginalized communities, regardless of where they are, to solve the problems that, are really most vital to them. And I think that in itself, once that vision gets brought to life, all of the sacrifice, all of the pain, all of the hard work will hopefully be worthwhile.
Yeah. What advice would you have for business owners who are maybe considering or is just starting out on their own, or would be business owners who are considering going out on their own? What might you say to them?
Yeah, great question. I wish someone had this information for me when I started as well. I think the information would vary depending on the stage that you're at. If you're just about to get started and you're just working on the idea, what I would say is, fortunately for you, you're probably at a time where you can interact with maybe services like some AI softwares that can help you kind of like build out your understanding of the business and the market. We didn't have any of that, so a lot of that was just trial and error. It was iteration after iteration of the mechanisms behind the business, and sending that out and then getting no replies or rejected and then going again and again. What I would say is, before you maybe look to start the business, if you have the idea, build the idea in your mind, refine it, get to a point where you coherently understand it yourself. And then what you want to do is like reach out to people who could be stakeholders, potential customers, whoever it could be, and just engage with them. Try and get an understanding if it's something that they believe will add value to them, will save them time or make them money, or a mixture of all things. Once you have like that initial level of traction, in the run up to and during that, you can just create like a wait list online, which is just a basic website. It won't cost you much. And then you can get people just to sign up to that and say, look, if we can deliver this service or this product, and it's something that you're interested in, please join our wait list. We'll keep you updated. As you continue to develop all of this traction and you make these milestones, you can get to a point where the momentum is building, and then you can realize from the data that is being provided to you, you potentially have something here, and then you can look to incorporate your business. And at that point, you can then maybe look to go to an angel investor or an early stage VC and say, recently incorporated, here's the idea. We have 5,000, 10,000, whatever it might be, people on our wait list. Here are the early designs for the platform or the product, etc. The more traction that you can generate, especially at the early stages, the easier it is for someone else to maybe buy into whatever it is that you're looking to do and see the value there as well. What I did was the opposite of that, and I would strongly recommend that you probably don't, jump in, both feet first. I had the initial seeding of the idea, incorporated the business, left university, left my work, and just kind of like worked on the frameworks and the business approach and everything else. And we did make some good milestones. We got invited to the UN, the House of Lords. We got recognised by the European Commission and recognised by Red Bull and loads of other things as well. And because I was quite young, I took that as early indications of validation from the market, if you like. And it is in a way, but it's also a bit of a vanity metric in hindsight. So what I would suggest is build real data, build real input, continue to push, to get to some key events if that's something that's on your timeline horizon, by all means, but have it backed up with, levels of engagement from different stakeholders and potential user bases, potential customers, etc. And then you create an overall sort of really appealing case study. Now, if you can get to the point yourself where you can build an early version of what it is that you're looking to sell, that really, really helps. It's called an MVP. We just weren't ever in a position to be able to do that, unfortunately. So, I had to go with what I had. But if you can look to build the initial version, even if it's very, very basic, then you can take it to somebody else who can interact with it and potentially see how it will grow. And that will save you time. It will save you years. It will save you a lot of pain and a lot of money as well. So yeah, kind of, I hope that answers your question. I've got a few more pieces of advice if you'd like it there as well.
Yeah, let's get to those in a second. But this is a really good one because, I mean, what you're really saying is you got to plant some seeds and water them and care for them before the plant starts to grow. And you've got to be, like you said, you've got to be really clear first what your offering is and what your market is. Because if you can't, what they say is if you can't explain it to somebody else, it probably means you don't understand it yourself. And you've got to be able to communicate
Absolutely.
to funders or investors and future customers what it is you do, how you add value, and you've got to have all of that clear in your mind before you just jump in. And you learned, right? You learned the hard way how to do it. What other advice have you got before we start to wrap up?
Other advice, there are some great networks out there. So, being a founder can be a really lonely journey, especially if maybe like you're the only founder or entrepreneur, like in your friendship circle or like your family circle or anything like that. So, look to engage with others either online or in like in-person meetups that have kind of gone through similar things. And soon you'll realize that, maybe the challenges that you're facing, they're not just relative to your journey. People have probably gone through them before and they can provide advice and support of how to move forward. Apply to accelerators. Some accelerators are really, really good. They'll even offer like cash upfront. They'll allow you to work with their network to build, your offering, your service, and that initial investment can really, really help at the early stages. Other accelerators will just offer you office space, and that might help too. But at the early stages, cash is really, really important, at least from our perspective. So engage with who you can, find value from the individuals that want to engage with you, but most importantly, pick the people that you want to spend your time around really, really wisely. And I think at the beginning stages, again, at least for us, you can kind of tell early on the people that might say that they're, happy for you and whatnot, but there'll be times where you can see that maybe there's some tension, if other people maybe disapprove of the
Mhm.
milestones that you make, or kind of wish that they've done similar things themselves and never maybe amounted to much. And I think the more time you try to spend around certain individuals and try to explain yourself and validate what you're doing, all you end up doing is just like wasting your own energy and causing yourself more problems over time. So, be nice to them, be pleasant, be humble, but control your environment. If it means, just having a space for yourself or your own place and working there, that's probably my biggest takeaway. If you can control your environment and control, who has access to you at different stages, you're already kind of setting yourself up for a win or for failure, depending on how you look to do it. It is a tough lesson to learn. Unfortunately, not everybody is going to be, willing to kind of like show you the support that you'd hoped for. And sometimes those people can be the closest ones to you as well. So it's a really, really tough one. But just look at it as constant validation that maybe what you're doing is the right thing. And if they didn't criticize, then maybe what you're offering, was never worth the criticism that the market will give back anyway. Because if you can deal with that early on, when you actually become the business owner and you start selling your goods and services and running your company, you'll face a lot more criticism from the open market anyway. So maybe look at it as a bit of a training ground. But yeah, hopefully all of this advice helps. If there's anything else, you can reach out to me on LinkedIn. More than happy to help other individuals, regardless of their stage or the business, and hopefully provide value back to people as well.
Yeah, definitely. And when this recording goes out, we'll tag your website and people will see you on LinkedIn and we'll tag you there and, people can get in touch. Thank you for that offer. That's really great. And we've come up to the end of our time together, Nick. This has been absolutely brilliant. Some really good nuggets of advice and information, learning from your journey. And it's been an absolute pleasure finding out about Attollo as well. I really
Thank you. I've really enjoyed the invitation to be here today. Obviously, thank you for your time.
And just to say thank you again to our listeners for tuning in. Keep an eye out for more interviews coming up soon on the YouTube and LinkedIn channels. But just want to say once again to Nick Pantelli from Attollo, thanks again for being on the Founders Chair.
Thank you. It's a pleasure speaking with you.